Measures report, which really will mostly be about the audit, and we have our two auditors with us already. And then we'll basically talk about where we are in remote and then where we're going with hybrid. That's the plan for the board meeting. So, Pete, do you want to get us started, or should we?
Let's call to order the board meeting for September 2020. Steve, if you take on the duties of guiding us through this, please.
Sure. Okay. Well, hello, Gus, and hello, James. Welcome back. Doug, do you want to do any introducing before we get started? I think we might have just lost Doug. We had him.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Do you want to do any introducing, talk through before we hand it over to Gus and James?
No, but so as you mentioned, we have Gus and James on this call. This is really around a preliminary audit. It's supposed to take place before our actual audit, just because of the nature of things. We happen to, we're doing it slightly late, but once we conclude the final audit, they will join in as well as they normally do. So Gus and James, please take over.
Thanks, Doug. Just wanted to, so this is really not a preliminary at this point. I think we're close to getting the audit done, and we did our interim work already. We had some issues we wanted to discuss with some of the testing that we've done. So Doug is right. We'll have another call once we circulate a draft. We'll have another call to review the financial statements, to review some highlights, just how the audit went. But we thought we would fit this in while we had a chance to speak to you about some of the deficiencies that we had encountered when we were doing the audit. So James, do you want to speak a little bit about the two issues that we've had?
Sure. So thanks, Gus. So some of the testing that we do during interim usually, and it's kind of bled into the year-end testing, is around credit cards and student files. And those are where we have the deficiencies this year. So we usually take 2 months of credit cards and we test for the receipts and pre-approvals that are required by the FPP. And just as an example, for October, we had almost $16,000 in credit card charges. And we have 3 users. In total, we had almost 90% that couldn't be supported by receipts or approvals. So we have the Director of Operations, Director of Finance, and the Principal. And really there's the Director of Operations is the main user of the credit card. He had almost 14,000 of the 15,800 in total charges and we couldn't, the school couldn't provide receipts for almost any of those charges. And February was actually a little bit better. But still, we were missing almost 30% of the total receipts for the credit card charges. So there will be a significant deficiency for credit cards. And similarly for student files, we check the student files to make sure that birth certificates, medical records, prior school records, the required DOE forms are all in the student files. So we selected 13 student files this year. Of those, we had 3 files that couldn't be provided at all. And there were several documents missing from our other selections so the files were incomplete. So there will be a significant deficiency for student files also at this point.
Doug or Steve or anybody, can we talk about the credit card thing? What went on there?
Well, there were several factors that happened. We had our Director of Operation. He used the card, and he has the managing operations manager at the time, which was Becca. That was somewhat of her task to track the expenditures and provide the backup to finance, which is myself, and that just did not take place. And with her going, some of those receipts I was informed were just missing. And realistically, in a perfect world, per our FPP, the charges are supposed to be pre-authorized, charged, and then the receipts are to be delivered to me in a timely manner so that I can appropriately file and class those expenditures so that they, one, they make it out to the board in time with the finance package. What we have done to kind of take care of it now, I've been working with James, the auditor. One of his recommendations were to kind of remove right now the director of operations from using a card so that we can, get those expenditures on the line and we can properly class those out. So I believe we've had a similar issue in the past, never as egregious as this one. So last year we were able, the year before that we had a finding. It wasn't a major deficiency, but we had a finding, and last year we was able to correct it. So we had no issues around the credit card. So what we're going, when I say last year, the last audit, not last year. So what we're going to do is, as we use the card, we will, make sure that I get the expenses as we go along.
And who is supposed to do the authorization of these expenses?
So depending on who, so there are three users. There's Steve, myself, and Alejandro. So typically if Alejandro is using his card, he's going to get authorization from myself or Steve. If I'm using my card, I'll go to Steve. If Steve uses his card, he'll come to me to make sure that there's always a checks and balance between the three of us who are using the card.
So Doug, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So why wasn't on a monthly basis receipts given and everything reconciled? I mean, I have a corporate card and I have to submit those receipts. So I'm just kind of wondering why we're paying a bill, but we're not seeing receipts on a monthly basis.
So from the finance side, it was requested, and the backup was just never provided. We requested it, numerous times. And for the finance committee, every time I provided a finance report, I noted that those receipts were missing, which could change, or which would change the financial report in which how the funds were, the expenditures were allocated. So I did mention it, on a monthly basis, but I know Alejandro, if Alejandro's on the call, maybe he can, jump in and, provide some clarity to why the card wasn't, the expense for the card wasn't given to the finance department.
Yeah, I can certainly so generally speaking, the team, and this would be the ops team in general, would anytime they place a request, they would typically they get pre-approval from me. They'd go ahead and make the expense. They'd fill out the authorization form. The backup would be stored, etc. In transitioning between operations managers, and in the moment that Becca left, there was a vacuum of trying to track down everything that should have happened. And they're usually set up by month, as by the structures in place from the year before.
I'm on a call.
From last year audit. Simply put, and I certainly take ownership as the person whose card and whose name is on that
I have to listen. This is a mess. I started listening.
There was a major vacuum created as a result of the change.
You can give Charlie a piece of cut, 2 pieces of Kit Kat.
And then finally,
why not?
We're trying to reconcile the overdue credit card receipt dates. The move to COVID severely impacted us and left Doug in a place where he had to answer for receipts that never happened or that weren't provided to him.
Yeah. So again, for the, it's 3 card holders, myself, Alejandro, and Steve. The backup for myself and James can contest to that. Steve and myself were able to provide 100% of our charges. and the charges that were, in question, came from Alejandro's side. There's a world in which we may still be able to get those receipts just so that we can have them on file, because it's still important for us to have them.
And going forward?
So going forward right now, we have suspended Alejandro's card. We are aiming to do very similar to what we did the previous school year, which was use the card, at very minimum, and write checks for everything. Because when we write checks, there's always an invoice that's attached to it. There's a real audit trail, and it's always pre-authorized before the expense happens. And it's a two-part check. It's me printing, Steve reviewing, Steve signing, and he's checking over me, I'm checking over him, and that goes out. So that's where we're pushing to go back, so we can have essentially a clean audit as we did the last audit.
Can I ask a question? By chance, could they have been the expenses for like the laptops or for the kids, and they haven't come in and they don't have an invoice?
No, those big expenditures like that, we always write checks. We're talking most of the orders or expenditures are online orders. So that's how we replenish our staff foods, like the grapes that we get. There are certain little items, $300 items, $500 items. They're not big bulky items, but there's a series of correct me if I'm wrong, James, for Alejandro card for October, there's about 60
Bye, guys. Charlie, what card be
transactions.
nice? Bye, guys.
Hello?
Yep. Sorry, that was I think that was John Barrett.
Yes,
So there's about 60 transactions, and I think the highest dollar amount was like $2,000. Is that somewhere around about, James?
Yeah, so for October, there's 58 transactions. The largest one is like about $1,000.
Yeah. So moving forward, I think, and Gus and James, the school has been in a similar place. When I came on board, we was able to clean it up. We just got away from it this year. I don't believe we will be able to correct this. We've already started the corrective action, which is to limit the card holder and push it forward for just checks.
Okay, let's, Naheem, you there?
Yeah, I actually have a question. In terms of getting or finding back receipts, is it that we require itemized receipts, right? Couldn't we just go to the website, to the credit card website, and use the transaction log as a receipt? And the reason I suggest that is that I have a similar process with my corporate card, and I often just misplace receipts. And the easy way to fix it is to use the transaction log online.
You are mostly correct. We would take any backup at this point to support. We do prefer the itemized receipt because it shows what we spent it for. It will allow me to properly class each item. Two, because we are a public entity, we have to make sure that we're spending the public funds appropriately, and that the public can see what those items were if ever requested. Two, we can essentially get all our receipts. I had a conversation with Alejandro Tuesday, I believe. He is working on that to go back through, I think it's from like June to May, essentially, to get this You know, I think there was a total of like 700 transactions total for the school year. So that to backfill, so that we have them, you know, it's a process at this point, and it's, you know, but we are actively trying to get it so that we could still essentially provide it to the auditors.
Quick question, as someone who does a tremendous amount of online shopping, don't you just get an email confirmation of your online orders?
Yes, you do.
Okay, and those should be itemized.
Yeah, and they should essentially be forwarded over, or just drop. What we use is a Dropbox. They could be dropped in the Dropbox as they're ordered. So, I mean, there's a system in a way that this should have not happened. It just happened, and you know.
Peter, can I raise a couple of points, please?
Pardon me?
Peter, can I raise a couple of points?
Who is this?
That's Barrett.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think there are like 4 or 5 different breakdowns here which we should address. Okay, one is the public funds issue. And again, I don't know exactly how the system works, but if you're buying from Amazon, seeing a charge to Amazon doesn't let you know whether the money was correctly spent or incorrectly spent. And so, so just being able to look at the credit card and seeing that a payment actually was made to Amazon doesn't help as far as our duties on that. And so I don't know how many items there are here, but I think that that just as far as internal policy, while it may not be material to our financial statements, as far as internal policy, we should select, you know, a meaningful number of those. And it's some of the larger ones, and just go back and get itemized accounts, what it is. Okay, so that's the one part, is protecting public funds and making sure that even if it's not material to our financial statements, we can feel good as directors knowing that we've looked into this on a retroactive basis. Then the next point is oversight. I've been on some finance committee meetings, not many, granted that. I'm not sure, and I'll ask other finance committee members, did anybody have the sense that sort of the vast majority of a meaningful portion of the credit cards are not being supported? I understand the classification comment being made, but did the finance committee have a good view that there's this degree of lack of documentation? Naheem, were you familiar with that?
No, it's not something that, you know, I'm not going to say it wasn't there. It's just not something I appreciated, at least not.
Yeah, and so it's a surprise to me as well. So Doug, just from a reporting perspective, if we're having issues like this should be explicitly called out at finance meetings. If you think things are going on that are worrying you and could get us to this type of situation, that's going to be explicitly called out. Steve, were you aware? When did you become aware that we had the issue to this extent?
I think it's like a you know, snowball, John. So I was aware there were issues and holes in the fall with the transition, and my understanding was it was being corrected. I didn't prioritize, you know, getting in the weeds to find out and be sure it was corrected. I know that Doug made a number of requests.
This came from February. Sorry, but this came from February and March.
Yeah, I know. Just the snowball continued, you know. So and not something I always thought, well, we'll get it fixed. You know, it's coming, and then new things happen. You know, then the pandemic hits and you get distracted. So it's not an excuse, but the explanation is it's a critical function of the school that we let slip, and I allowed to slip without correcting it, and you know, other things interfered. I can't happen in the future.
There's without correcting, but there's also without notifying. The finance committee, again, I wasn't every call, but if Naheem is not aware of it, that's just a breakdown of our internal process as well, which is not good. Then the next step is the sort of overreaction issue. Going to checks is going to impact our ability to acquire things online and get things into the classroom and help the teachers in the way we should. So I'm not sure going to checks is the right approach. Again, when I say I'm not sure, I'm not trying to be nice. I'm really not sure that's the approach. I know in the past we've always discussed is they're buying the stuff online and the credit card's being a great facilitator of the timely process. So I'm not sure whether that is the right response. But one approach which I've seen work, and I'd like to ask the auditors for approaches that they've seen work, is if we have Alejandro seems to be sort of the primary cause of this, if we use his personal card and we will pre-fund that to a certain amount. I'm not sure what the amount is, but he, in order to get reimbursements, he has to provide us, with those invoices, and we'll cut the checks to him, and so there's no delay in the school acquiring it. But Alejandro will have every incentive to make sure he provides the invoices, because otherwise it will be his burden to bear. I'm not sure Alejandro is okay with that, but again, we'll be fronting him the cash, and he has to just make pretty darn sure that if he's going to get invoices and he wants to be reimbursed, he'll provide the right documentation in a timely fashion. So, but over to the auditors about what are you guys seeing other schools do?
So if I may, before they jump in, with the check function, and I'm quite sure Gus and James will probably second this, it is in our best interest to always use our checks more than our cards. We use the credit card is supposed to be used in the event that we can't write checks, right? So that's for our online orders, and that's what we typically will do. Doing away with or suspending Alejandro cards, the way that we are going to process it is that when we need to use the card, we will use Steve or my card, which will have us involved in the transaction a little bit more, which as soon as they're placed, we will make sure that we get those transactions booked accordingly. And
okay, fine, makes sense.
Yeah, using the card requires a lot more detail in the accounting world. With the check function, it's cleaner, it's faster, and it's always traceable per transaction. When we're looking at fraud, it limits our exposure. So, and then I will let Gus or James jump in if they.
Well, hold on. I mean, you don't need to. If this is a workable solution, it's not impacting the quality of operations. Then that solution works.
Gotcha. And for
I'd like to add one thing to this, that in the future, how the solution you come up with, I agree with John, seems very workable. I'd like the finance committee have it on the agenda every month to make sure that these procedures are being followed.
Yeah. And for the finance call, I can say personally, I could have probably, amplified this this issue. I lightly noted because in my mind, we were able and willing to fix it. I would always say, so what I did was, instead of breaking the credit card down per transaction, I booked it to a certain place so that it's earmarked to always be broken down. So I would mention on getting a call that there's a lack of backup that's not supported. This particular line represents all our credit cards, where I didn't make it explicitly known to the finance committee that we are in the possibility of a major deficiency, because it's the task to get it corrected. To me, it is a small task. It's providing the backup. As Brandy said, she's an online shopper. You get the invoice, you pay for something, you get something emailed, you just drop it in the Dropbox.
Right. And not
so,
only that,
I guess in any case, in the future, when you get to that item during the finance meetings, be more specific, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. And it was supposed to be definitely correctable.
Okay.
and Doug, even
sorry, go, Brandon.
Even if you don't have the specific emails, being that you have an online account with a particular vendor, you can also look at your transaction history. Right. So all of this is very easily obtainable, whether via the email confirmation of the order or going to the vendor and looking at your specific transaction history.
Correct. And, I would say, no, that's 100% correct. The issue that lies is it had to do with, I guess, and I would need Alejandro to speak up to this. It's the timing now for him to go back, or his team to go back to get those transactions, because essentially for the purpose of like our FPP, I don't have access to everything, so that does not allow me to place orders, so that, you know, like there's a checks and balance. So I can't go in. It's really Alejandro and his team that should be able to go into those sites to get those backups. And that just did not happen.
Well, I guess this is really a question for Alejandro. Alejandro, when can this be done by? It's really that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Like,
Yeah.
are you going to take your Saturday? Like, sounds like a fun Saturday afternoon. Like,
frankly, it's not as simple as that, but yes, it is. I mean, I have the utmost urgency because, I mean, frankly, I am, as a person who heads up operations, my name being that on the card, it is frankly embarrassing to be at this point. So I don't need anyone to, you know, so I certainly understand that. As far as timeline, the issue being is it's certainly a snowball effect in the sense that past orders during when Beck was here, and then also in the springtime, the person who's the operations assistant is currently also on leave. So there's extra steps that would need to be taken in order to track these down. That being said, I will work with Doug. The hope is within a few days' time to be able to get all the receipts in order. I don't know, I'm not giving myself a date at this point because we're working on some of the reopening pieces, but I will, within the week, have everything set.
Okay, good. I think
Okay,
from here on out,
Peter, one more item. Peter, just one more item. Gas, as far as deficiency, how is that noted? What can we do to make sure that the notes in our financial statements does not show that there's been sort of a potential loss of public funds? I mean, I understand the process was broken, and that's going to be noted in the letter. But what can we do to get you guys comfortable there's not going to be any question mark about the fact that we've, in the end, that these funds were used appropriately?
Gus, can you help us there? Hello?
I think Gus is having trouble with his internet.
Yeah, he definitely looks frozen. But yeah, jump in, James, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
Yeah,
the
I'm
wording of
really
the,
having a lot of issues with the internet. James, do you want to?
sure. I mean, I think the wording of the deficiency, it would be similar to what it was in not last year, but the year before, where we'll say that the charges were missing receipts and approvals. It won't specifically mention, it doesn't specifically mention public funds, if that's the concern. As far as removing the deficiency, I mean, there's still the issue of no pre-approvals. So the receipts would be good to have. It would be whatever we can get would be good at this point because we are missing so much. But the fact that most of the transactions were not pre-approved to begin with is still an issue.
Sure, but I just want to make sure that to the extent, as the process was broken, pre-approval wasn't done, invoice wasn't collected. We understand the process was broken, but there's a big difference between the process being broken and the money being actually spent on inappropriate things. And we're just going to make sure we don't have that, and we've tracked down to give you the guys comfort that the money wasn't spent or otherwise redirected from school purposes.
Absolutely.
Can somebody hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure. My internet's really bad.
I can't. Does anybody hear Naheem?
We almost had you guys, but I don't think we got you.
Naheem, if you can hear me, I think this has to become a regular agenda item for the Finance Committee to make sure that this matter is being properly handled.
Some
And,
of the deficiencies.
I think we should continue on with the discussion of the overall audit. But this is a priority item that should be addressed by Steve, Doug, and Alejandro, and Naheem, and the Finance Committee should keep a sharp on it, please.
Yep, heard you, noted, and will do going forward.
Thank you, Naheem, very much. Gus, would you go ahead, please?
Can everybody hear me? Everybody hear me now? I'm really having a lot of issues with the connection. I'm fading in and out, but one of the things John mentioned earlier about what others, others are getting those receipts to us. Yeah, it's not just a matter of getting the transaction, it's having the receipts to back up those transactions. So John was right. But one of the things to make it a little easier for the school going forward is you can set limits. Anything under $50, anything under $25, wherever you're comfortable with, that you don't have to get receipts for. So that's one thing to make the bookkeeping process go a little smoother. But this is an internal control deficiency. The fact that it wasn't addressed right away, it's definitely a breakdown of internal controls. We'll give you to respond and come up with, as Doug mentioned, a corrective action plan. But some of the ways.
And I think he froze.
Yeah, I think he might be adding in, but I think what he was going to
The fiscal plan procedures manual. I think that's one of the things we can do, and to limit it a little bit.
Yeah, I think what Gus was going to say is that one of the things that we've seen, especially with like the volume that you guys have of credit card transactions, is maybe considering a limit where something under 25 or under 50, you wouldn't require a receipt, something to that nature, where you'd be focusing more of the bigger things. So the way the FEP is written right now, you have a $10 transaction not supported by a receipt, that's an exception. So when you have a $16,000 bill at the end of the month, it might be something to consider. You set a threshold.
Steve and Doug, will you get on that and talk again with the Finance Committee and set a more reasonable limit, please?
Yeah, that's as they said, it's a part of our FPP, so that's an easy update. So on our next Finance Committee call, we can start to talk about that. When I joined the school, that was one of the first actions that I did, which was to update our FPP, and I guess I can update it again to set those limits on the dollar amount per transaction that requires the backup. All right. James,
do you want to continue with the audit?
I mean, the other issue that we had with student files, we had this issue, and I've been on this account for 4 years. So we've had an issue with student files in the past. It was cleaned up last year. But this year we selected 13 files. 3 of the files I haven't gotten yet. I don't know if they're not able to be provided, but either way they're missing. And then for the files that we did get, the remaining 10, there were various things that were missing. Some of the required DOE forms, missing a birth certificate, missing an immunization form. Just that the files appear incomplete. So that will be a significant deficiency also.
Steve, or who's in charge of keeping these files?
Yeah, this falls under an operation, and truly, I don't know if there's. I'd have to double check to see what files are missing. There is the majority of these files are living digitally within our student enrollment system, Schoolment, because it's hard to believe that there'd be missing files at any given point. So I imagine this is something where all the files are probably living in a digital repository, as we are now doing both digital and physical files. So I would need to check which students those were. But I wouldn't know until I actually saw those names.
And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was an issue that came up when SUNY paid us a visit in advance of our last recharter.
Yeah, years ago, sort of similar to the credit card, situation. It was a problem years ago, and Alejandro actually came in and corrected the problem by transitioning us to all online files, which allowed us to track systematically what was not there. So I really don't know what the breakdown was now because we are consistently using the online system. I'm just guessing there are incomplete files that weren't followed up on. I'm not sure what breakdown happened in the system that caused that. That's got to be fixed as well.
Frankly, whenever preparing any student file audit, I get the list of student names that are being pulled. They'd be pulled in the instances where there were missing documents. They'd be supplemented with what was already in the digital repository, printed, and then given off to the auditors. So they do live protected and organized by student name. In this instance, with COVID, Doug came on site, pulled names, and I don't know that I ever had a chance to even look back and see what was missing what. So that's typically in a normal audit cycle. In a perfect world, all of them would be in there from the beginning, but obviously with new students and files coming in, it doesn't always happen in an automatic basis, but rather we are confident that at least they live in one of two places, physically or digitally. In this instance, with COVID and Doug coming on site when we weren't there, we weren't prepared for essentially pulling in printing so that the files look complete physically.
Hey Doug, do you mind giving Alejandro the list of the list of student files that we're missing information? We're happy to keep it open and allow you guys to find the documents. It's up to you. Like
Sure.
we're willing to we'll remove it if you can give us the documents.
He's actually in receipt of it as well. So yeah, so it's something that I guess we as a school are actively trying to make sure we get. Again, I don't know. I know the person who takes care of it. She may have some of it in her emails. But I'll send him the list over to him again to just make sure that we have it or he has it. And we essentially, if I may, sorry, we also at the tail end of the audit. So I would say we have almost by like months in mid-October the latest to take care of this. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'll be fine as long as we get it before. We need some time for for our QC department to look at it, to review it, time for us to get on another call with the board. So yeah, mid-October would be fair. We'll give you every chance to find it, and if you do find it, it'll just make it we'll either remove it or make it just a recommendation if there isn't that many files that are missing. We just felt there was way too many files that were missing for this.
There's frankly no way a student would ever be admitted to Harlem Link without at least the core amount of files on there. So what you might see is in the instances where they might not have the most updated physical. And so you might see that missing in a few instances. But for the most part, the key documents, those required by the state and those just required just for entry would have almost always been, unless they were obviously McKinney-Vento students, but otherwise would have been collected at the point of admission. So those documents can certainly be found.
Yeah, we can't make that determination. All we're doing is looking at history. So
No, I'm saying that my guess is that those documents exist and that we can get them to you.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
In a perfect world, it should be that at any point, because we can have a surprise audit by SUNY, that let it be myself, Steve, Margaret, anyone should be able to go to a student file and pull it out and have everything that's needed to be there at any given time. So that's something that we're actively working on as well.
Also the state education department has been auditing a lot of schools. So just
at random.
we've gone through 2 or 3 of these audits already, and they really look at the stuff in detail. So, just because you're going to give it to us, after we've been asking for it for months, we're just trying to protect you guys, because that you could get audited by SUNY, by the audit services of SED, and they really dig into this stuff, probably more than we do. So we just want you to be prepared in case this happens. That's all.
Yeah, there's a process by breakdown, even if we fix it at a later date. Understood.
To that end, John, I'm wondering is there a software that, it seems pretty, like if we're doing this online anyway, it seems like we should have something with a database manager where if there is a missing file that is easily detected by the appropriate people.
We do.
Okay.
We do have a system that houses all our student records. Is it Infinite Campus? It's one of the systems. I forget the name because it doesn't fall in the finance department. It's more of an operation, and they will upload it. But we do have a system that we do house it, very similar for our employee files. All of our employee files are essentially in the cloud. So when we get audited, it says what we're missing. Historically, we've had issues with employee files. The last 2 years, none. So that is, we have the system. We just need to follow the system.
Understood.
I got to tell you, I don't know how the system answers your question, Brandy. I mean, we're getting into the weeds here, but there's no spreadsheet that I can look at, and maybe I just don't know how to use the process of Infinite Campus or Schoolman, whatever it is, and push the button and say, okay, these 6 kids are missing that file, So all of it requires some level of data managing, and that takes time when we have other priorities that impose themselves for good reason or not good reason. And it's not an excuse. It's just to underscore that there is a challenge associated with getting these right. And it needs attention and priority, because it is critical. It's a function that we have to perform well.
Hey, if that covers the deficiencies, can I ask one thing before going for the audit? Is it okay? I'm not sure how we got for time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fine. We've got a lot of cash sitting around, and I've been exchanging some emails with Doug about what to do about it. So 2 questions for you all. To how much cash has a typical charter school put aside for sort of liquidity issues in case the state doesn't fund on time? And 2 is, what are they doing with the excess cash now?
Did you apply for did you apply for the PPP, Doug?
Yes, we did.
Yes,
we applied for it in this fiscal year. We got it July, late July.
You got it in July, okay.
So
Good. I mean, to John's point, so, it really depends. Some schools are looking at it. I mean, I think visually, if you look about this with the finance committee, just setting aside some money in a reserve, so to speak, just to have around. And it really depends on the school. If the school has facilities, they put aside money for facilities. So it really depends on the school and the risk that the board is willing to take, or whatever risk tolerance the board is willing to take. So that I've seen up to anywhere from $1 million, $1.5 million to put aside in a reserve account, and to segregate it as board designated funds, and we explain what that is. But a lot of schools are, as you know, we just got approved for the state Senate aid that we didn't think, a lot of schools didn't think we were going to get. We got that. A lot of schools are budgeting for anywhere from a 5 to 15% decrease in funding, in per pupil allocation funding. So, I mean, if you talk to Ralph Rossi at SUNY or others at SUNY, they'll say you're entitled to that. They can't do that. but I'm sure the state could decrease it or delay. We've seen some delays in the funding with the per pupil allocation. So it really, you know, there's no easy answer to that. You just have to kind of say, here's, you know, do we have 30 days in cash or 60 days in cash or 90 days in cash? It really depends. And what I've seen other schools do is they would do these budgets less than 10, less than 15% for next year and the year after, and see what they come up, what the deficiency is, or that they come up with, and that's what they put aside. So it really depends on each school.
Okay, thanks, Gus.
Mhm.
So we'll have to make some decisions there. Anything else on the audit?
You know, we can speak some more about this when we review the financial statements. We'll speak a little bit more about it at that time as well, when we give you some ratios, some stats, things like that.
That'll be next month.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, James and Gus, if you want to stick around, you're welcome to, but you can drop off as well. We're a little short on time. Doug, do you want to give us a 30-second summary of the fiscal year status?
Pretty well. Finances are on par. For the most part, we haven't had much credit card transactions for the month of July and August. We are in receipt of those expenditures. There was very few of them. I just want to jump to page 3 of the agenda that shows our financial statement. To talk, for August on cash on hand, we had $5.2 million. That's one of the talking points. Our board member John Barrett talked about just using some of that cash to do other things. We have some receivables. The bulk of the receivables came from what Gus mentioned, which is our special state aid funding. That is roughly like $83,000, and so we will be in receipt of that in the next month or two. Overall, we're pretty strong. Lastly, if we look at our fixed assets, there's a decrease in fixed assets that started in June, and that's just because of depreciation. But we are still, buying laptops for our students to make sure each child, have technology. And as we purchase more laptops, we will see our fixed assets go up. And lastly, our current liability shows $2.5 million. A portion of the reason it went up in July is because we received the PPP funds. So at this point, we're like 98% sure that it's going to be forgivable, but just that 3%, or we're booking it to our liabilities, and we'll draw it down and recognize it in cash over time. So we will see that current liabilities deplete as time goes by. And that is my TED Talk.
Doug, is there a fact-specific reason why you're only 98% sure, or you're just talking programmatically?
Yes, because at this point, when the PPP funds came out, it's just so much unknown around it.
Got it, but nothing specific to us. Okay.
Nothing specific to us. We are using 100% of the funds for salaries. So that's why I'm like 98 versus 65. We did not use it for any other expenditures, just 100% salaries, and that's going to take us out for the course of the year. And I also want to note that we applied for the CARES grant, which was $171,000. We was approved. We are waiting for those funds to hit our books, like actual in receivables.
Randy, if you could just read the congressional tea leaves for us, then we can hit that last.
If only. I never know what I'm going to see when I turn on the TV, so I don't know. But we are being careful around because, with respect to PPP, there are sort of, staff retention rules, and we're paying attention to those.
Absolutely. We did not let any staff members go. And we actually created, I think, 2 positions from last year. So
Okay.
it should be doable. If we didn't get the PPP, if we didn't get the CARES Act, I was going to use $100 or so thousand for our summer program. But since the CARES Act was to help close the gap for education in our summer program, we spent more money this year to help close the gap for the pandemic, so that to get our kids ready for this fiscal year. And that's what I earmarked the funds for the CARES Act. So the PPP funds is going to take a little longer, but I think we will be able to use all of it this fiscal year.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, should we move on to the program, the actual school? So in interest of time, let me just back up in the agenda here and look at the cover here. We want to talk enrollment. We want to talk about attendance. We want to talk about where we are with the remote learning, and then where we're going with hybrid. So enrollment is stable. I'll share the chart here. So we currently have 46 vacancies. That's fluctuating. That's almost a week. That is a week old now. So that number's different. I'm not sure if it's higher or lower. We do see mobility in September. We did see a spike right up before school started. I think most of that spike is actually about our conservative projections and kids showing up that we were projecting might leave or might not enroll. We do have a number of kids that are not engaged yet because of technology, and they're waiting on machines, and they're the first crew to get machines that are being distributed this month. Even with that, we have over 80% attendance every day, which has been a lot higher than it was in the spring. It's remarkable. We set a 93% target, so we're not there yet, and we know we can get there. We have some kids who have struggled with attendance in brick and mortar and still are, and our social work team is involved with those kids and those families to figure out what the barriers are and how to help them. We have other kids who struggle with attendance in brick and mortar and have better attendance in remote. So every family is different, every context is different, and we're applying our principles of care, understanding, and pushing the accelerated learning at the same time to all of these situations and cases. Does anybody want to add anything or ask about enrollment or attendance before I move on?
Other than to say, good job, I don't have anything else to say.
Thank you. And Joe's team pushed really hard. I think that a lot of the effort from the summer with recruitment messages and social media work and community engagement in Voica was a huge push and help. I think that ended up paying off in the end, but the job is only partway done. We still have vacancies. It's not a sustainable situation to have this many vacancies. And the special education numbers are still high, and that does bolster the funding, but that's not the purpose of the funding. It's supplying our co-teaching model, which is, we need it for that purpose, but budgetarily, we've got to close a gap still. But the school is not fiscally at risk because of enrollment, which was a possibility in the spring when the numbers looked really dire. Okay, on to the virtual school program. So we're off and running. We started on September 2nd. We've got others on the call who can say more about it and give context, but I'll give you a brief high-level summary. Our consistent, regular daily schedule that started in the spring has continued. We've got 8:30 morning meeting in every class. Every classroom is functioning like its own classroom, only in the virtual space. We've got a lot of staff members who have different roles who are pushing in and helping and supporting. And the team over the summer did a really thoughtful job of trying to think about what all the needs are. If we had to be remote all year, how could we fill all the needs of the kids that may fall through the cracks in the spring because we just couldn't do the level of intervention or the level of social emotional learning that we did during the regular school year. So that's been a big focus. We are not starting with hybrid like the DOE is on Monday, if they do start on Monday, and there's still a question about that. And Laura, if you have anything to add, be interested to hear your perspective. Our plan is, and I'll briefly talk about the hybrid plan, and then we can go back and fill in any more details or questions people have about the current virtual plan. So the hybrid thinking is, our official plan released to the public is that on October 5th, we'll start with 3 cohorts. Cohort A comes 1 week, cohort B comes the next week, cohort C stays home all the time by family choice. And we're not going to fully roll that out yet. We have a few things that still need to fall into place. One is we're not certain, despite the confidence, that the building is ready. I attached a ventilation report to the agenda. Board members can review that on their own. It's online on the DOE website also. A lot of broken mechanics in our building. And so I want to know if the airflow exchange rate is appropriate in our classrooms before we put people in there and create a little tinderbox of virus transmission. And I have no information about that. The custodian doesn't seem to have answers either. This whole thing feels like the city is rushing into it without having the science-based information. So, and I know that our staff members have a lot of fear about it as well. And our families do. We've heard that from families over and over again. We're worried, we want to get back, but we're worried. So we want certainty before we move forward. Another thing that has to fall into place is just our own planning. We focused on remote. And
Steve, if I might interrupt for just a second, when do you expect to get the kind of analysis you need to be sure that the atmosphere is going to be okay?
Any day now or never. And the never part is, I think we all would accept, a few weeks or more of the DOE operating safely. So if we see that, then we'll know that the promises they've made, despite not having the scientific backup of exchange rate in classrooms and all the fans working, it's appropriate. So I'll take either science or practical proof. But we're working with the custodian because he's the locus of this information to the extent that it exists. It doesn't exist in our building, and we'll find out as much as we can, on a daily and weekly basis. And so far, it's been very little.
If I can,
Steve,
if I
just
can,
on.
All right, John Barrett, then John Reddick. John Barrett?
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not.
We hear you, John.
Okay, great. So is your concern, is it a school facility concern? Because again, as you guys know where I stand on these things, but Sweden's shown that the kids can be in school, the teachers don't catch it, the kids don't catch it, there aren't spreaders. That data is pretty conclusive, but the Swedish schools probably have decent ventilation. So is your concern a concern about our facility specifically, or is it about general kids returning to school?
A little bit of both. So I'll just share my screen. You can't see it, John, but it's in the agenda. If you look at our ventilation report that covers by room, we have a lot of partially operational exhaust fans. So air is not being pushed into the rooms, and air is only partially being expelled from the room. So my understanding of the science is, and these are old buildings across the city, is you need to have air circulating in and out of the room twice an hour to be considered safe epidemiologically. And the DOE says an open window is enough. So there's a column here, at least one window can be open, yes or no. Almost all those are yes, because we have windows in our building. They open about 3 or 4 inches. It's not like you have a fresh air breeze coming in. So we have concerns about that. Again, it'd be alleviated if in our building, people are supposed to start Monday. So if we see a few weeks go by and we don't have the cases popping up everywhere, then we'll feel like, okay, the DOE is correct, an open window is enough. But no one seems to have a definitive answer about this. It's just a promise, and there's been a lot of promises to the DOE.
Okay, and if we asked a parent in our school, hey, the school is, what is the primary reason that the school is not back in full? Is it because of concerns about COVID generally, or is it because of our building's HVAC system? Their answer would be?
I would say they'd probably say generally. Yeah.
Okay. I think we got to communicate that this is a ventilation decision, and that's why we may be doing stuff differently than other places. And we got in, and we don't control the ventilation system. We don't control the fixing of the ventilation system, and we don't know the answers. And just highlight that as the issue, because I don't want guys switching. People might switch anyway. I know I would switch if I thought this was going to be and that our administration was opening up the school, but at least if the other DOE schools are okay, we'll open up. But we can't afford kids switching, and we can't afford parents thinking this is our fault.
Agreed. Yeah, our messaging has been that we will come in when we know that our building is safe, so we can highlight that as well. We will as we go forward. We're starting to, now that we have more of a plan about what the hybrid kind of phase in will be, and I'll mention that briefly. We'll have more opportunities to get in front of parents to talk about it. John Reddick, did you want to add something?
Surely. I was in school on Tuesday, and I had spoken with the custodian. When it comes down to it, as sanitation, cleaners and things like that, he's got a grasp on it. Because I sat down with him for quite a while to talk about that, because I'm at high risk. So I wanted to find out he's also at high risk. But there are certain little things on those filtering systems that still have to be worked out. And that Board of Ed is supposedly working on it. I gave him my number, so he will be in touch with me. Okay? Just to let you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's been work done. I mean, some things have happened. I've seen new filters have been put in. There's been replacement of the motors for the big fans. Like the DOE's done some stuff over the summer, but the question is it enough? And, they've gotten supplies, they've gotten materials.
Yeah.
Is it enough is the question. So the hybrid.
Steve, I just wanted to add something. As a parent, just to the point about switching, what John Barrett had mentioned, do you mean like to switch a school because
I think he does.
Because this building is not ready?
Yeah, I think that's what he meant.
Okay. I mean, just to speak to that, I know I'm only one parent and one family. The majority of the schools in New York City are dependent upon the DOE to correct many different ventilation issues. Like I've been following reports myself and also, following the news. So as far as switching, it's like I wouldn't switch from you guys to another school because most of them are pretty much in the same position, I would say, unless you have like a charter school that has their own building that they're actually responsible for, and that's kind of few. And just as an example, as we see, Success has decided to push back their remote learning all the way to the end of the year because they also are relying on DOE buildings to be up to a certain standard. But as I'm listening to you talk about the buildings, does this mean that October 5th will not be a possible date? Will that date be reconsidered?
We are reconsidering October 5th, and if we do October 5th, we're planning for it. We're planning on phasing it in and not having all the cohorts right away. And we have limited data. We didn't get a complete response from families about what the needs are. We only have a small number of families who requested hybrid on our survey. So we're starting with those families, and we're going to do a small pilot of a couple of rooms to start in October, assuming we can get the assurances the building is safe. So that's the plan, and then every couple weeks sort of add more rooms online as we see the systems be consistent, as we see the building be safe, and so forth. I think that getting the pulse of the parent body is a critical part of this work. So Monica, you and I, I'm looking forward to partnering in the next couple weeks to getting a real temperature check beyond what we have from the surveys, and getting information out to families, along with the whole team we have, communications team we have.
Sure, I was thinking the same. I think we should maybe do another, maybe like a town hall, or like we did before with the parents.
Yeah, we'll do that soon.
Maybe sometime soon. Yes.
I think you and I also some offline discussion to keep it going.
Okay. Great.
Okay, anybody want to add anything from faculty or staff who, just brief highlights of, I know we're over time here, but brief highlights of the instructional program so far and what's coming up? Okay, I mentioned, I attached something else to the board meeting because it came up at the executive committee meeting, which is a popular study by NWEA, an organization that we used to work with for assessment. saying that students have lost 30% of their learning over the course of the pandemic, just in the spring. I don't know that we believe that number, but we certainly see evidence of learning loss in our data. So in the education committee, we'll be talking about what we're doing about that as a school. So that article is there for you to read. It's not super robust, but their big study is linked, so you can read through their study and decide for yourself, how valid it is based on their metrics. And as a school, we're focused on highlighting doing assessment, finding where the gaps are, and making sure that our tier 1 is supplemented by all the robust interventions I described earlier to get the kids up to speed. Okay, I think that's the show. Are there any other questions or comments?
Well, thank you all for coming. I move that we bring this meeting to adjournment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Anybody opposed? Thank you all for taking this valuable time to hear us out, and I hope that we can resolve our operational problems, and then we can go on to the really big ones that Steve discussed at the end. Thank you again.
Okay.
Enjoy, everyone.